Have you ever left a review online and never thought twice about it again? Maybe you posted about your Airbnb experience or complained about a late food delivery. Now imagine this. What if one random GPS review you left actually triggered the reopening of a decades-old missing child case? What if a single sentence you typed out late at night sparked a chain reaction involving local police, national news, and a family that's been searching for answers for over 20 years? I want you to hold on to that thought as we begin this story, because what you're about to hear isn't just another internet mystery. It's real. It happened. And it all started with a man who simply wanted to help others avoid traffic on a hiking trail. Welcome to a story that will make you question everything you know about coincidence, digital footprints, and the strange ways the past can resurface when you least expect it. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand how one seemingly harmless GPS comment turned into the break everyone had been waiting for in a case that had long gone cold. Let me ask you something. Have you ever followed your GPS into a weird area and felt that uneasy feeling in your chest like something wasn't right? You look around, and maybe there's a fence where there shouldn't be one, or a house that looks like it hasn't been lived in for years, even though it's marked as active. Or maybe it's just silence, the kind that wraps around you and makes you feel like you're being watched. That's what happened to a man named Mike Sandler, a software engineer from Eugene, Oregon, who decided to take a new hiking route one weekend with his dog, Maddie. He wasn't searching for adventure or danger. In fact, he was looking for the opposite: peace, nature, quiet. But what he found instead, deep in the Oregon woods, was something that sent a chill down his spine. And it all began with a review he left on a GPS navigation app that read just one line: "Something's not right here." Saw a kid's shoe near an abandoned van. Felt watched. Avoid. Now you're probably thinking, a shoe? An abandoned van? What does that even mean? Couldn't that just be a weird coincidence? Or maybe even someone just living off-grid? And you'd be right to question it, except there was one major problem. The area where Mike dropped the GPS pin had long been connected to a missing child case from the early 2000s. A case that had haunted the community. A case where the child was last seen near that exact forested area. And when police cross-referenced the pin Mike left with old search maps, their jaws dropped. This wasn't just near the last known location, it was in a gap zone, an area that had never been searched due to bad terrain and limited access. Mike had unknowingly wandered into a blind spot of the original investigation. His review wasn't just odd, it was the first real lead in over 2 decades. I want you to really think about what that means. For 20 years, this child's family had no answers. No closure. Just fading flyers, dead tips, and birthdays with an empty chair at the table. And then, out of nowhere, a random man with a dog, a GPS app, and a gut feeling says, something's off, and suddenly the case is alive again. That's not just a story, it's a domino effect. It's what happens when digital footprints meet forgotten trails, when algorithms collide with human emotion. And the most haunting part? Mike had no idea. He didn't even know the child was missing when he wrote the review. He wasn't trying to play detective. He was just being honest about what he saw and how it made him feel. That one decision, that one sentence, changed everything. You're here right now because you want to know how that happened. You want to know who the child was. What happened after the review was posted. What police found when they went back into those woods. You want to know if this was all some crazy misunderstanding, or if, after all these years, someone had finally gotten close enough to uncover the truth. I promise you're going to get that answer. I'm not going to bait you and leave you hanging like a cliffhanger mystery podcast. We're going to walk through this step by step. From the very beginning of the case to the exact moment the review went viral and caught the attention of a retired detective who had never truly let the case go. But to truly understand what makes this story so chilling and so powerful, we have to go back. Back to the year 2002. Back to a summer afternoon in Clatsop County, Oregon, when 6-year-old Elijah Mayfield walked out of his backyard and was never seen again. Now, before you jump to conclusions or start Googling details, pause. I want you to feel what this family felt. I want you to hear their story the way it was experienced. Raw, confusing, heartbreaking. Elijah wasn't some troubled kid. He wasn't sneaking off or running away. He was playing in his backyard sandbox with his twin sister, Ella, while their mom was inside folding laundry. It was a normal summer day. There was no warning, no scream, just a few minutes of silence, and then nothing. Ella said he followed the dog around the side of the house. That was the last time anyone saw him.
No body.
No clothes. No trace. For years, the case went nowhere, despite extensive searches, hundreds of volunteers, and even psychics getting involved. It became one of Oregon's most frustrating cold cases. Theories ranged from wild animal attacks to abduction by someone who knew the terrain. But nothing ever stuck. Until Mike's review. And what's even more unsettling is this. The area where Mike found the van and the child's shoe, it wasn't marked on any of the old search maps.
Why?
Because in 2002, GPS technology wasn't what it is now. Drones weren't a thing. The place Mike stumbled into was practically invisible on foot back then. It was steep, heavily wooded, and easily overlooked by search crews trying to cover wide areas quickly. But now, with satellite imaging and public mapping apps, hidden places aren't so hidden anymore. Mike had unknowingly revealed a ghost zone. And when police returned to that exact spot, cameras rolling and canines in tow, what they found raised more questions than it answered. It wasn't just the shoe. It wasn't just the van. There were other signs that someone had been there recently. Fresh trash. A fire ring. An old tarp. And most chilling of all, initials carved into a tree that matched Elijah's. By now, you might be sitting forward, wondering, could Elijah still be alive? Or is this the work of someone trying to mislead the investigation? Who left that stuff there, and why now, after all this time? You're not alone in those questions. The internet exploded when this story came out. The hashtag Elijah Mayfield trended for days. True crime forums went wild. People started combing through old news footage, comparing missing persons reports with abandoned vehicle records. And while some called it coincidence or clickbait, others believed, deep down, that this was the break that would finally bring peace to a family that had been holding on for way too long. But here's the twist. Mike almost didn't post that review. He almost deleted it. He told his wife later that night, "I thought I was just being paranoid." But something stopped him. Something in his gut told him to trust his instinct. And that's what this story is really about. Not just about a missing child or a chilling discovery, but about the power of intuition. The digital age may give us maps and routes, but sometimes it's our own inner compass that leads us to the truth. Mike Sandler hadn't planned to be anywhere near Clatsop County that weekend. His original plan was a short getaway with his wife and their golden retriever, Maddie, a kind of digital detox after weeks of working late nights on a stressful cybersecurity project for a tech startup based out of Seattle. But just days before they were supposed to leave, his wife came down with a bad sinus infection, and Mike, already packed and restless, decided to take the solo trip anyway. He told himself it would only be for 2 nights, a quick escape into nature to reset. He booked a modest cabin near the edge of the woods through a vacation rental app and, almost as an afterthought, downloaded a GPS hiking trail app that allowed for user-submitted reviews and off-the-grid trail markings. That app would become the quiet center of a story none of them could have predicted. What Mike didn't realize at the time was that while he was trying to escape noise and deadlines, he was about to walk into something that had been silent for too long. The morning he found the van had started off like any other hiking day. Overcast skies, wet earth from an earlier drizzle, and that kind of deep woods quiet that city dwellers often romanticize but quickly find unsettling when they're really alone in it. Maddie tugged excitedly at the leash, sniffing every log and root, while Mike scanned the tree line for deer or anything worth capturing with the compact drone he kept in his backpack. He wasn't thinking about missing persons or crime scenes. He was just exploring, logging his route on the app as he went, leaving breadcrumbs for future hikers. But sometime after noon, something shifted. Mike noticed how the trail became overgrown, almost deliberately so, with brush that looked as if it had been dragged into place. At first, he thought maybe a ranger had closed it off for maintenance or wildlife protection. But there were no signs, official or otherwise. The trees seemed denser, the shadows darker. Even Maddie, usually fearless, hesitated. That's when he saw the corner of the van, just barely visible through the trees, its once white exterior streaked with grime, partially concealed by a mound of fallen branches that looked too intentional to be natural. And next to it, half buried under pine needles and dirt, was a tiny blue shoe. He didn't touch anything. Just stood there, heart racing, trying to process what he was seeing. The van looked like it had been there for years. Flat tires, shattered rear window, moss creeping up the sides, but there was also evidence that someone had returned to it. A plastic water bottle, fresh cigarette butts, a crushed protein bar wrapper that hadn't faded from sun exposure yet. Mike took a few cautious steps closer, snapped a picture on his phone, and quickly turned back. That night, in the safety of his cabin, he uploaded his trail and typed that now infamous review. Something's not right here. Saw a kid's shoe near an abandoned van. Felt watched. Avoid. He debated whether to post it at all. He even deleted and retyped it twice. But something gnawed at him, an irrational sense that if he didn't share it, he might regret it. He hit submit, closed the app, and tried to forget about it. He couldn't. What he didn't know was that a retired detective named Sharon Delaney had been monitoring that exact GPS app for months. Ever since she stepped away from law enforcement, she kept a quiet eye on the case that haunted her most, the disappearance of Elijah Mayfield. Sharon had long believed that the child had wandered farther into the woods than the original search teams had accounted for. She had theories, ones her colleagues had called gut instinct, about certain off-map trails being more accessible than they'd appeared during aerial searches. She never imagined that the clue would come from a hiking app, but when she saw Mike's post, it was as if everything froze. She cross-referenced the location with her old case files, then forwarded the coordinates to a contact still active in the department. Within 48 hours, the site had been secured. But what investigators found inside that van only deepened the mystery. There were no human remains, no blood, nothing that screamed foul play. But there were toys. Faded, water-damaged action figures. A folded Spider-Man blanket. A cracked plastic lunchbox with an old Pokémon sticker. All consistent with what a child might have had in 2002. Forensics dated some of the materials back over 2 decades. And yet, mixed among them were items too new to be coincidental: a recent model energy drink can, a phone charger with a USB-C end, and prints too smudged for immediate identification. Whoever had been there had been back, possibly within the past few weeks. The team couldn't say for sure whether Elijah had ever entered the van, but they couldn't rule it out either. It was enough to reopen the case officially. Enough to start the quiet panic among locals who had once believed this nightmare had long passed. As news of the discovery began to circulate, old rumors resurfaced. A few townspeople remembered a reclusive man named Wayne Kettleman who had lived out of a van and disappeared suddenly in the summer of 2003. He was questioned at the time but ruled out, his alibi backed up by fuel receipts and security footage from a gas station 2 counties over. But now his name was being whispered again, especially since no one could confirm if he'd ever truly left Oregon. Then there was the Mayfield's former neighbor, Joel Cardenas, who had been arrested in 2005 on unrelated charges of possession and later released. His proximity to the family back then raised eyebrows, but again, there was no solid link to Elijah. And let's not forget the wilderness itself, a character in its own right. There were always local stories, urban legends, whispered warnings about things that don't want to be found in those woods. It was enough to muddy the waters with fear and superstition, the perfect breeding ground for red herrings. Meanwhile, Mike's life began to shift in unexpected ways. His GPS review went viral, and suddenly he was fielding interview requests from podcasts, news outlets, and social media influencers trying to capitalize on the accidental hero angle. But Mike didn't feel like a hero. He felt exposed, paranoid. People online started digging into his past, analyzing his social posts, speculating about his motivations. Some accused him of planting the scene for attention. Others wondered if he had a connection to the case no one had yet discovered. And while there was no evidence to support any of it, the scrutiny wore on him. He began losing sleep. Maddie, his dog, developed a nervous tic, whining whenever he got near the backpack he had worn that day. Mike started second-guessing every memory. Had he really felt watched? Had he imagined the hush in the woods? Or worse, had someone been there hidden just beyond the trees? Then one night he got a message. No sender. No contact info. Just a screenshot of the GPS trail he had logged zoomed in. A red circle drawn around the van. The caption read, "You were close. Too close." Mike froze. He hadn't shared that screenshot with anyone, not even his wife. It wasn't part of the public app post, which meant someone had been watching, either at the scene or afterward. So, who sent the message? Was it a warning? A threat? Or a cruel prank by someone with too much time and internet access? The investigators weren't sure, but it raised more questions than it answered. Had Mike been lured there on purpose? Was he just unlucky? Or had someone meant for him to find it? That theory led to even darker questions. Was Elijah's disappearance random? Or part of something far more calculated than anyone had dared imagine? We still don't have all the answers. But what we do have is a trail, one that was never meant to be found. And the deeper we follow it, the more it feels like someone out there doesn't want the truth to surface. But what are they hiding? And how much longer can they keep it buried? The next clue wasn't found in the forest. It was found in a box hidden in Elijah's old bedroom. And what was inside? It changes everything. Mike never expected the fallout to follow him home. After turning over the GPS coordinates and photos to the authorities, he tried to distance himself from the story, hoping the professionals would take it from there. But instead of peace, he found paranoia waiting for him on the other side. News vans began showing up near his neighborhood. Strangers parked on his street, pretending to walk dogs or take phone calls, their eyes lingering a little too long on his house. He started receiving emails from amateur sleuths who claimed they'd solved the entire case through Reddit threads or YouTube videos, some with bizarre conspiracy theories involving government cover-ups, others accusing Mike of staging the entire discovery for likes. He dismissed most of it as internet noise until a package arrived on his doorstep. It was unmarked, no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a folded sheet of paper that simply read, "You're not the first to look. Just the first who got noticed." Against his better judgment, Mike plugged the flash drive into a spare laptop, one he hadn't used in years and had wiped clean recently. What he found was both chilling and confusing: an old home video, grainy and shaky, showing a birthday party from the early 2000s. Kids in paper hats, balloons tied to a chain-link fence, cake-smeared faces. The date in the bottom corner said August 2001. But what caught Mike's attention wasn't the kids or the decorations. It was the man filming. You could hear his voice faintly, talking to one of the children, asking how old they were now. Mike paused the video, backed it up, and froze the frame. He'd seen that man before. Not in real life, but in a photo he came across when researching the Elijah Mayfield case. It was Wayne Kettleman. That discovery should have been a breakthrough. But when Mike tried to hand it over to the detective handling the reopened case, he was met with cold reluctance. The flash drive had gone missing, vanished from the sealed evidence bag he had delivered it in. The official response was vague, something about a filing error and a miscommunication in chain of custody. Mike didn't buy it. Someone had taken it. Someone who didn't want it in the record. When he asked Sharon Delaney, the retired detective who had first flagged his review, if this kind of thing had happened before, she hesitated for a beat too long before saying no. Her eyes didn't match her answer. Then came the warning. A voicemail, left in the early hours of the morning, scrambled and mechanical like it had been run through software to mask the speaker's identity. "Stop asking questions, Mike. You're walking into something you don't understand. People forget things for a reason." It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It sounded like advice. Like someone who had already tried to pull at the same thread and lived to regret it. And if that wasn't unsettling enough, something happened next that changed the entire tone of the investigation. Sharon Delaney disappeared. She had been preparing to meet Mike at a local diner, a quiet place they'd agreed on for privacy. She never showed. Hours passed. Mike called her, texted. Nothing. The next day, her neighbor filed a missing persons report after her mail piled up and her car was still in the driveway. Inside her home, there were no signs of struggle, but her laptop and all her case notes were gone. Detectives labeled it a possible voluntary disappearance, citing her age and mental state. But Mike knew better. Sharon had been meticulous, passionate. She wouldn't have walked away from a lead unless something, or someone, forced her to. And then came the betrayal. Mike's own boss at the cybersecurity firm asked him to take a leave of absence. Unpaid, he added uncomfortably. He cited concerns over the company's image, the influx of media attention, the optics of Mike being tied to a possible cold case turned active investigation. But Mike had seen the internal Slack messages. He knew someone inside the company had flagged his online activity and private searches. Someone had been monitoring him. Worse, someone had tipped off his firm. The deeper he got, the more it felt like a trap was slowly closing in around him. Every clue seemed to vanish. Every lead blurred. The only thing that didn't disappear was the gnawing sense that this wasn't just about Elijah Mayfield anymore. It was bigger. And it went further back than anyone had guessed. That's when Mike learned something that blew the lid off what he thought he knew. While visiting Elijah's parents to offer an update against their lawyer's advice, he noticed a locked drawer in the boy's old desk. Something about it seemed off. The mother, hesitant at first, finally agreed to open it. Inside was a faded newspaper clipping from 1989. It detailed the disappearance of another child, same county, nearly identical circumstances. A child no one had ever connected to Elijah's case. The boy's name? Nathaniel Kettleman, and that's where everything began to unravel. Mike barely had time to process the name before his phone buzzed, an alert from a messaging app he rarely used anymore. It was from his younger sister, Lexi, who lived in Arizona and had no connection to the case, the region, or anything even remotely tied to Elijah Mayfield. But her message was short and jarring. "Did you send me something weird in the mail? It's a burned photo. No note. Just a picture of you from that camping trip when we were kids. Your eyes are scratched out." Mike's stomach dropped. That trip had been over 20 years ago, a family vacation to Yellowstone. Nothing eventful, just a week of campfires, park rangers, and disposable cameras. But he remembered that exact photo because it had disappeared from their family album when they moved houses years later. Now, it was not only resurfacing but deliberately altered and mailed to Lexi, of all people. It didn't make sense. She hadn't even commented publicly on the GPS trail story. Why would anyone target her? That wasn't the only disturbing development. Just hours after that message, Mike received an email from a restricted account with no sender listed. The subject line simply read, "You missed something." Attached was a photo of the same newspaper clipping about Nathaniel Kettleman, only this one had notes scrawled in red ink all over the margins. One sentence was circled 3 times. "Last seen near Devil's Tail Road, about 3 miles from where the van was later discovered." It was the same region where Mike had gone hiking. The same woods. The same isolated path. But this was from 1989, long before GPS tracking, before user-submitted trail reviews, before hikers like Mike could stumble upon the truth by accident. How many kids had vanished before Elijah? How long had this stretch of land been swallowing people without anyone noticing the pattern? Mike printed out the article and started to draw a map, one with pins and strings like something out of a conspiracy docuseries. The pattern was undeniable. The disappearances, though years apart, all occurred within a strange radius. The problem was that the original investigations had been handled by different counties, different departments, and in different decades. No one had ever put them together. At least, not officially. But someone had. The problem was, whoever had done this work wasn't trying to solve the case, they were trying to control it. Meanwhile, a new twist emerged that further complicated everything. A local journalist named Natalie Cruz, who had been covering the GPS trail discovery for her independent YouTube channel, uploaded a video that went viral almost instantly. In it, she claimed she had obtained a leaked voicemail allegedly left by Elijah Mayfield's father just days before the boy vanished. The recording was muffled but disturbing. In it, the father, Peter Mayfield, seemed to be warning someone not to come near the house again and that he would go to the police if this continues. Natalie insisted the voice on the other end wasn't a stranger. It was someone Peter knew, someone he feared. But just hours after a video was published, it was removed from YouTube, taken down for violating community guidelines. Her channel went dark. Her Instagram account vanished. No one could reach her. She was just gone. Mike was starting to feel surrounded by shadows. The more he uncovered, the more people vanished, the more connections unraveled, and the less sense it all made. Who was behind the flash drive? Who sent the photo to Lexi? Who scratched his eyes out of that old picture? And why bring up Yellowstone? Was that trip more than just a vacation? Had someone been watching them even back then? He couldn't trust the timeline anymore. And worse, he was beginning to question the people around him. Even Sharon Delaney, the one ally he thought was on his side, had a hole in her past. Mike dug into old department records and found something she'd never mentioned. She had once been assigned to a juvenile task force investigating disappearances along the Oregon-Washington border in the late 90s. The files were sealed, but the pattern was there. And Nathaniel Kettleman's name appeared again, this time scribbled in the corner of a transfer form that had been redacted. Was Sharon just trying to right an old wrong, or had she known more than she let on from the beginning? Just as Mike was putting these pieces together, a new message arrived, not through email or text, but in a more terrifying form. A Polaroid photo taped to the windshield of his car while it was parked at a gas station. It showed Maddie, his golden retriever, asleep in their backyard from just a few hours earlier. Someone had been watching, close enough to photograph his dog, close enough to approach his home. The note on the back simply read, "Keep digging and she's next." Mike clutched the photo, his mind racing. This wasn't just a warning. It was a game. Someone was watching every move he made. Someone who didn't care about leaving fingerprints or being traced. Someone who already knew what mattered most to him. And then he realized something he hadn't thought about until that moment. Lexi hadn't posted her current home address online. Not on social, not on LinkedIn, not even in family group chats. So, how did they know where to find her? Unless someone close had told them. It happened on a Wednesday, a day like any other, or at least it started that way. Mike had stopped at a local diner, the same place where he was supposed to meet Sharon before she vanished. It had become a kind of ritual for him, revisiting the booth by the window, half hoping she'd show up out of nowhere, half hoping someone else might instead, someone with answers. The waitress didn't even ask for his order anymore. Coffee, black. Same plate of eggs and hash. Comfort food for someone who hadn't slept through the night in weeks. As he stirred the coffee absent-mindedly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Lexi. But it wasn't a full message, just a single photo. Blurry, taken from what looked like the inside of a moving vehicle. A highway sign in the frame. She was traveling. That in itself wasn't alarming. But what threw Mike off was the caption. "He says I'm safer if I leave town. Don't try to call." He stared at the screen, his hand tightening around the mug. He tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. Then again. Then once more. Nothing. It wasn't like her to go dark, not after everything they discussed, not after the photo incident. And who was he? Why was she listening to someone else instead of him? Panic began to rise slowly, not all at once like a punch, but like cold water seeping through the seams of a sinking boat. Mike paid the bill and left the diner, heart racing faster with every step back to his car. He didn't even notice the black SUV until it pulled out behind him for the third turn in a row. At first, he thought it was coincidence. The kind of car that blends in, tinted windows, clean paint job, no decals or damage. But every time he changed direction, so did they. When he ran a red light out of desperation, they stopped. Then turned off down a side street. Almost like they wanted him to know he was being watched, but only on their terms. By the time Mike got home, it was well after dark. He walked the perimeter of the house, flashlight in hand, checking every door and window. Nothing seemed out of place, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had already been inside. The drawer he used for his USB drives had been pulled open an inch. A floorboard near the back door creaked louder than usual. Maddie, usually eager and barking when he got home, remained curled in the far corner of the living room, ears pinned back, tail tucked. She had that look dogs get when something's wrong, but they don't understand what. He stayed up all night that night, sitting on the couch with a baseball bat in his lap, staring at the front door like a soldier in a trench. The next morning brought no relief, only more confusion. He received an anonymous envelope in the mail, inside of which was a single page torn from a legal document, a family court transcript dated nearly 2 decades ago. It involved custody proceedings for a child whose name was redacted, but Mike recognized one of the listed names. Wayne Kettleman. It was his voice again, the same man from the old birthday video, the one who appeared again in the GPS region's missing persons trail. But the transcript revealed something else. Wayne had fought for custody and lost. The court had determined him unfit due to an unspecified mental health episode, one that required him to spend time in a state-run psychiatric facility in the Pacific Northwest. None of this had come up in any articles, any background searches, any police briefings. It had been buried. And then, the worst part, someone tried to break into Mike's house that night. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even dramatic. Just a sharp metallic sound near the back door around 3:20 a.m., followed by a deep mechanical hum, like someone using an electric tool on a lock. Mike bolted upright and flicked on every light in the house. When he rushed to the kitchen, he caught a glimpse through the window, a silhouette, male, tall, stepping calmly into the woods behind the property. Not running, just walking, as if he had all the time in the world. The back door hadn't been damaged. No scratches. No forced entry. Just a smudge, like someone in gloves had tried the knob. The police came hours later, took a statement, made notes. They said it was probably just a vagrant or a prank. But Mike knew better. He installed cameras the next morning, reinforced the doors, bought an alarm system. He didn't even recognize himself in the mirror anymore, eyes sunken, beard scruffier, hands constantly trembling. The paranoia had rooted deep. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was war. And he didn't even know who the enemy really was. Then came the final blow of the week, an email from someone named Oliver_Steps1971, a handle that meant nothing to Mike, yet it slipped past all his filters and landed directly in his inbox. The message was brief. No threats. No riddles. Just a screenshot of an online obituary for a boy named Nathaniel Kettleman, listed as presumed deceased, but with no body ever recovered. The date of death, April 2001. That matched the birthday video. The one with the man filming. The one who'd allegedly lost custody years prior. So, how could he have been with Nathaniel if the court stripped him of visitation rights? Why was he near the boy when the official story said he hadn't seen him since the ruling? Something didn't add up. And now, for the first time, Mike began to wonder if the original case, the one about Elijah Mayfield, was just a decoy. A cover to keep something older buried. Something deeper. Because someone was trying very hard to erase not just people but entire histories. Lexi was gone, Sharon was missing, and Mike was being followed. The walls weren't just closing in. They were being built higher, thicker, with no way out. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Mike received a letter by courier. No return address, no postage, just hand-delivered. Inside was a photograph of Mike, asleep on his couch, taken from inside his house. And on the back it said, "You've already let one of them in." Mike didn't sleep that night. Not after receiving the photo of himself from inside his own home. He tore the house apart, checking every vent, light fixture, and drawer for a camera, some bug, anything that might explain how someone had been in and out without a trace. But there was nothing. No hidden tech. No broken locks. No footprints in the garden's soil outside his window. Maddie hadn't barked once. That disturbed him more than anything. How someone could have stood over him while he slept and left behind a single Polaroid without the dog reacting at all. That meant it wasn't just anyone. Maddie must have known them, trusted them. That narrowed things down, but also made the realization worse. Because there were only a few people Maddie knew well. And one of them was Sharon. That thought clung to his brain like tar as he reviewed everything she'd ever told him. She had seemed genuine, smart, determined. But what if she hadn't vanished? What if she had gone underground? Or worse, switched sides? The sealed juvenile task force files from the 90s, the quiet gaps in her resume, the untraceable number she always used when calling. How had he missed all that? In his desperation for a guide, a partner, he had overlooked the red flags. And now, with Lexi gone and his house no longer safe, Mike realized he had to do what he should have done weeks ago. Go back to the start. Not the GPS trail. Before that, the spark. The original breadcrumb that started this whole descent. The review he had posted online. He logged into his old trail account. Pulled up the GPS upload. Nothing had changed. It was the same text, the same coordinates, the same photo of the trailhead. But something caught his eye. A user comment that hadn't been there before. Just a single sentence. You were never supposed to see that file. No username. No timestamp. But the chilling part? It was written in his style. Same grammar, same phrasing he used often. Almost like it had been written by someone who knew how he thought. It wasn't until he zoomed in on the comment that he realized the account name wasn't random at all. It was his own name, slightly misspelled. One letter off. Created the same day he first posted the trail review. That's when the twist hit. This entire sequence of events might not have been random. He hadn't just stumbled upon a clue. Someone had led him to it. Maybe not to help him uncover the truth, but to make sure someone like him would start digging. Someone with a following, someone persistent, someone just cautious enough to investigate without drawing police attention too soon. He was being used. His curiosity had become the perfect weapon. The review, the flash drive, the mysterious photos. It had all been orchestrated. But the question now wasn't how, it was why. And that's when he remembered something else. A name. Not Wayne Kettleman. Not Elijah Mayfield. Not even Sharon Delaney. But a lesser-known figure he had only briefly seen in the background of an old police photo, barely noted at the time. Thomas Pell. Listed once as a junior intern in a cold case unit. A name that showed up again in the corner of a redacted form. A name that, when searched online, led to virtually nothing. No LinkedIn. No social presence. But then Mike checked the metadata of one of the old GPS trail files, and there it was. Buried in the upload info. Tpel_01. It was him. Thomas Pell had uploaded the original encrypted GPS file. The same one Mike found. But he had done so under an anonymous submission portal for outdoor enthusiasts. It had sat idle, invisible to the public, until Mike's settings accidentally made it visible. Pell had planted it there, waiting for the right person to find it. But if he worked on cold cases, why wasn't he bringing the truth to light himself? That's when Mike received the second voicemail. This one from an unknown number. The voice was distorted, digitally warped, but still recognizable under the layers. It was Sharon. She said only a few words. You don't know what you're looking at. Stop before you find out what they did to me. Then silence. Then static. Then something faint, barely audible. A child's voice whispering, "He's not gone. He's just hiding." The line went dead. Mike froze. His stomach turned. His ears rang. He played it back over and over. That voice. It wasn't Elijah. It wasn't Nathaniel. It was someone else. Younger. Frightened. And it wasn't recorded, it was live. It had an echo. A room. Someone had been near the child when the voicemail was sent. The real horror wasn't that the mystery was unsolved. It was that everything he thought was true might have been part of someone else's plan all along. And somewhere behind another screen, someone was watching. And suddenly, the biggest question of all hit Mike like a truck. What if the missing kids weren't all dead? What if this wasn't a string of abductions at all, but a long, coordinated effort to hide them? But from who? And why now, after decades of silence, was someone suddenly using him to shine light on the trail, waiting for his next move? Mike's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, scanning every pair of headlights behind him. He wasn't sure how long he'd been driving, just that he had left the city limits an hour ago, with no destination in mind except somewhere far, somewhere untraceable. The voicemail from Sharon kept playing in his head like a looping nightmare. The tone in her voice, strained, mechanical, layered with fear and something that sounded a lot like guilt, shattered any illusion that she'd been a bystander. And then there was the child's voice.
Real.
Present. Not a recording. That single whisper had undone every assumption Mike had made about the case. If even one child was alive, this wasn't about closure anymore, it was about rescue. But rescue came with a cost. When he finally pulled over at a remote gas station off Route 86, his phone lit up again. No number. Just a notification from a secure messaging app he hadn't installed. The icon was already on his screen, like it had been placed there remotely. When he tapped it, a video began to play. Grainy, night vision footage. It showed Lexi.
Bound. Alive.
Crying, but otherwise unhurt. The camera tilted, showing a calendar in the background with today's date circled in red. Then came a message in text. Stop digging or she disappears. For good. Mike's gut twisted. Rage and terror flooded through him all at once. He'd been backed into a corner, but the cruelty wasn't just in the threat. It was in the timing. This meant someone had Lexi for days and waited until the exact moment he was closest to the truth to force his hand. The deeper he got, the more lives were on the line. He knew what was happening. This wasn't just intimidation. It was control. Classic isolation tactics. Take the people he trusts. Turn them into pawns. And then make him choose. Keep going or protect the people he loves. But what made it unbearable was the dawning realization that the person who sent the message wasn't just some anonymous puppet master. It was someone in his circle. He thought about who knew his movements, who had access to Lexi's routines, who had vanished without explanation just when things began to escalate. And his mind kept circling back to one name he hadn't been able to bring himself to confront: Aaron. Aaron wasn't just an old friend. He was Mike's childhood best friend, a man who had lived in the same neighborhood, been around when Sharon first came into Mike's life, even helped him post some of his earlier hiking reviews. Aaron knew all the GPS routes Mike took, had his spare keys, and most importantly, was the one who told Mike to follow up on the review site when the GPS metadata first popped up. It felt like a helpful nudge at the time. Now, it felt like a trap. Driving back into town, Mike made a decision that would haunt him. He texted Aaron and asked him to meet at the Overlook, the same cliffside spot they used to hike as teenagers. Remote. Isolated. No cell signal. It was the only way to have a real conversation, without someone listening. When Aaron arrived, he was casual, smiling, wearing the same old windbreaker from their college days. But Mike's tone was cold. He demanded answers. He asked him about Sharon, about the GPS trail, about the secure messaging app and the photo inside his house. At first, Aaron denied everything. But then Mike mentioned the calendar in the video. That was when Aaron flinched, just slightly. But enough. Mike had seen enough interrogation footage by now to recognize the micro-expression. He was caught. And suddenly, the man in front of him no longer looked like a friend. He looked like someone trying very hard to keep a secret buried. Aaron didn't confess. He didn't need to. Instead, he tried to justify it. He said it was bigger than Mike could understand. That there were people involved who could ruin lives with a single email. That the missing children weren't just victims. They were evidence. And evidence had power. Evidence needed to be controlled. Aaron claimed he was trying to protect Mike. That this had all been a way to keep him on the edges, away from the fire. But now he'd walked into it. And there was no walking back out. Mike had never felt more alone. He stood there, wind howling across the rocks, staring at someone who once meant everything to him, and realizing that trust had been weaponized. He could walk away, pretend none of it happened, save Lexi, go back to the illusion of safety. Or he could keep going, knowing full well that every step forward could cost another life. That was the impossible choice. Save the people he loves, or save the truth. As he drove away from the Overlook, one final message pinged onto his phone. This time, not from the app, but a regular text. No name. Just a number he didn't recognize. The message read, You already made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Attached was a photo. Not of Lexi. Not of Aaron. But of a third person, someone Mike hadn't seen in over 15 years. His younger brother, who had been declared missing in 2008, still looking exactly the same age as the day he vanished. The truth wasn't just personal anymore. It had always been. Mike barely remembered the drive back into town. His thoughts spun in tight, suffocating circles, unable to land on anything for more than a few seconds before the next brutal realization ripped through. The photo of his brother, same freckled face, same corduroy jacket he wore the day he vanished, same frozen moment in time, burned a hole in his mind. It wasn't just that his brother looked unchanged after all these years, it was the implication behind that stillness. Someone had him. Someone had kept him. And somehow, impossibly, someone had prevented him from aging, or at least from living freely enough to change. But it wasn't just the impossibility that haunted Mike. It was the gut-wrenching suspicion that this whole nightmare wasn't about the children being hidden from the world. It was about them being preserved for something. Something worse. He pulled into a parking garage beneath a worn-down city building, one that housed several government offices. That's where his contact worked, a woman named Celia Hammond, a cold case analyst turned whistleblower who'd reached out after seeing his story circulate on Reddit and YouTube, where true crime forums were already chewing through bits of what he'd leaked. Celia didn't work in missing persons anymore. She'd been reassigned months ago, demoted after pushing too hard on a cluster of disappearances from the early 2000s that overlapped with Mike's timeline. She'd warned him before, this wasn't about one case. It was about dozens, maybe hundreds. She was waiting for him on the 7th floor, in an empty records room that stank of mold and ancient paper. Her eyes were darker than he remembered, sunken, twitchy, like she hadn't slept in days. She wasted no time. "It's not just your brother," she whispered, sliding a file across the table. "They all look the same. Every kid. Same age as when they vanished. Same clothing. You think that's coincidence?" She opened a folder, photo after photo of missing children, each supposedly recovered during different trafficking stings over the years. But none had been reported. None had made the news. And none of the kids looked like they'd aged at all. Mike felt bile rise in his throat. "How?" he managed. Celia just shook her head. "That's the wrong question," she said. "The real question is why." Before he could respond, a loud bang echoed from a hallway. They both froze. Heavy footsteps. Voices, men moving fast. Celia's expression changed from urgency to terror.
"They followed you," she said.
"We have to go, now." She yanked open a metal cabinet behind her, revealing a narrow stairwell that led to the alley. Mike hesitated, but followed, heart hammering. As they stumbled into the freezing night air, his phone buzzed again. Another video message. This time from an anonymous email address. He opened it. It was Lexi. Again. This time she wasn't crying. She was staring straight into the camera, her face blank, dazed. Behind her, someone stepped into frame. Mike's heart stopped. It was Sharon.
Alive.
Unbound.
Calm.
But it wasn't just her presence that crushed the last pieces of Mike's trust. It was what she said. "We told you to stop," she said flatly. "But you kept going. You think you're the first to try? You're not. You're just the most visible. That makes you dangerous." She stepped closer to the lens. And expendable. The screen cut to black. Mike stood there, paralyzed. Celia pulled him by the arm, dragging him into her car. "She's part of it," he whispered. "She was helping them the whole time." Celia nodded, tears welling. "She's not the only one." And that's when she handed him a USB drive. "This has everything," she said. "Internal memos. Funding trails. Private contractors. They were doing experiments, Mike. Not on criminals. Not on adults. On kids. Missing ones. Ones no one would report. The trials were called Project Echo."
She paused.
"Your brother's name is on the earliest intake logs." Mike couldn't breathe. The cold wasn't just outside anymore, it was in his chest.
Spreading.
Drowning him. But there wasn't time to process. Celia's dashboard lit up with a GPS signal. A red, tracking them. She cursed under her breath and slammed her foot on the gas. They know we're together. They'll come for both of us now. As the city lights blurred past, Mike realized the scope was far bigger than anything he'd imagined. This wasn't a local trafficking ring or a rogue cop looking to cover up old mistakes. It was systemic, institutional, layered with silence, and hidden inside data no one was allowed to see. Children were being taken, not just hidden but erased. And the people doing it weren't strangers. They were his friends,
His allies.
his government. Everything he thought he knew had been twisted. And they were still watching, still one step ahead. The storm had rolled in quicker than expected, sharp winds tearing through the trees, rain hitting the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. The forest road twisted like a snake in the dark, the headlights barely cutting through the fog that now blanketed the mountain's edge. Mike gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, pulse hammering in his ears. Celia sat in the passenger seat, her hand clutching the USB drive like it was the last beating heart of something pure. The documents on it were damning. Reports from private defense contractors, lists of acquired test subjects, logs showing timestamps and experimental outcomes marked with chilling phrases like inhibitor response successful and age suspension viable. But most disturbing of all, an archived video, grainy and low-res, showing a sterile lab where children sat in silent rows, expressionless, each one with a patch affixed to their temple, eyes dull, as if the very core of their minds had been hollowed out. They were headed toward one last location, a remote facility buried deep in national park land, listed in the files under the codename Echo Site Alpha. According to the metadata, it had been decommissioned years ago. But Celia's last-minute trace showed power spikes at irregular intervals, consistent with testing operations. Whatever was left of the program, it was still active. And someone was keeping it that way. As they arrived, the trees opened into a clearing where rusted fences lined a concrete perimeter. They killed the lights and stepped out, guided only by a flashlight and adrenaline. The entrance to the bunker was hidden behind a maintenance shed, masked by camouflage netting and overgrowth. A biometric lock blinked red, until Celia pulled a card from her jacket and swiped it through.
Green.
The heavy door groaned open, revealing a stale corridor lined with old lab tiles and long-dead fluorescent tubes. Inside, it was colder than outside. Not from the air, but from the feeling. The weight of secrets buried so deep they'd never seen sunlight. They moved fast, past old filing rooms and glass chambers covered in dust. Then they saw it, a control room still blinking with life. Monitors running facial recognition scans. Names, locations, tracking points. Mike's face appeared in the corner of one screen, labeled Threat Level Escalated. But it was the camera feeds that stopped him cold. One by one, they showed live footage of rooms still occupied, children sleeping on cots. Some moving like ghosts. Some staring directly at the lens. Frozen in time, just like his brother. That's when the door behind them slammed shut. Out from the shadows stepped a man Mike had only seen in photographs, Dr. Nathan Greer, the original project director. Supposedly dead for over a decade. But here he stood, older, weathered, eyes sharp behind glasses. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said, voice calm, as if discussing logistics and not the stolen lives of hundreds of children. "But you had to know.
So we let you."
We needed to see what someone like you would do with the truth." Mike's heart pounded as realization sank in. The review. The GPS glitch. The whispers from insiders. It wasn't just coincidence or carelessness. It was bait. A test. They'd been watching from the start. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why them? Why my brother?" Greer sighed and approached the console. "Because some things are too valuable to let go," he said. "Time, Mr. Delaney. Youth. Memory. We're not monsters. We're visionaries. We found a way to preserve the future by studying its most unspoiled source, children untouched by age or trauma.
Pure minds. Clean DNA.
We learned how to stall development, how to study time itself from within." Celia lunged for the USB port to upload the evidence to the cloud, but alarms immediately blared. Automated lockdown. A metal shield slid over the console. And then, a sound, the soft shuffle of feet. From the hallway behind them, children began to appear. Dozens. Blank-faced. Silent. Led by Sharon. She was dressed in a white coat now, not her usual jeans and boots. Her voice carried across the room, sharp and professional. You should have stopped, Mike. You could have walked away and saved yourself the heartbreak. But you kept pushing. And now they're awake. All of them. Her eyes flicked to the children. They haven't seen open air in years. Some never have. Do you really want to be the reason their stability shatters? Mike stepped between her and the console, trembling with rage. They're not lab rats. They're kids. You stole their lives. Sharon only tilted her head. No, Mike. We extended them. Everything happened at once. Celia smashed the emergency fire panel, setting off a suppression blast that flooded the room with smoke. Mike dove for the children, calling his brother's name. One of the boys turned, eyes flickering with recognition, lips parting. Michael. And then came the roar, Greer lunging forward, syringe in hand, screaming for them to stop everything. In the chaos, a child grabbed Sharon's hand, not with trust, but with force, and yanked her to the ground. The spell broke. The others moved too. Not like machines. Like survivors. Mike reached the console and plugged in Celia's drive. As data uploaded, backup generators kicked in and security footage was streamed to every major media server preset in the protocol. In minutes, the world would see everything. The lies. The program. The proof. Greer tried to pull the plug. Celia stopped him. With a bullet. The screen flashed. Upload complete. But the twist came after the dust settled. When authorities arrived. When Mike was taken to the hospital and reunited with his brother. That's when a plainclothes agent approached, handed him a sealed envelope, and whispered, "For your eyes only.
You were never supposed to be part of this.
But your DNA matches another subject." Inside the envelope, a birth certificate. Not his brother's.
His.
With a different name. And a project ID number stamped across the top. Mike wasn't just looking for the truth. He was the truth. And he had just blown open the only life he had ever known. The days that followed were quiet in the way only true aftermaths can be. A strange stillness had fallen over everything, like the world itself was holding its breath. The story broke across every major network within hours of the leak. Secret government experiments, missing children found alive, black site exposure, and classified memory research became some of the most searched terms in the country overnight. News helicopters circled the Mountain facility for days, blocked by federal agents, while online forums lit up with speculation, conspiracy theories, and questions that no official was ready to answer. Some called it a hoax, others demanded justice, but a growing number of people, those with missing loved ones, those who'd always felt like something about their lives didn't quite add up, started coming forward with eerie similarities and childhood fragments that no longer seemed like dreams. A movement began forming, quietly and collectively, as if something deep in the public consciousness had been awakened, and no one could go back to sleep. Mike spent most of his time in a secured hospital wing reserved for psychological trauma, but not because he'd broken down, rather because his presence had become too symbolic, too dangerous. He had become the face of the truth, a man who stumbled into a dark corner of history simply because he left a GPS review with the right coordinates and asked the wrong question at the wrong time. Or maybe, as he'd come to suspect, it was the right time. His brother, now slowly adjusting to life outside the program, remained quiet and wide-eyed. He didn't remember much, names, places, feelings, but he always recognized Mike. He'd reach for his hand during the night when he woke up in a panic, and Mike would be there, grounding him. That connection, though scarred and delicate, was the first piece of real peace Mike had felt in years. Celia disappeared after the media storm, no trace of her online or off. Some said she was in hiding. Others whispered that she had always been deeper in the system than she let on. Either way, Mike didn't report her. He owed her that much. Sharon and Greer, both under federal custody, had become lightning rods for public outrage, but their trial was being handled behind closed doors. The excuse was national security. The public was promised answers in due time, but Mike had learned enough to know that time, in these circles, meant never. Still, small details trickled through unofficial channels, leaked documents, insider confessions, anonymous whistleblowers, which kept the story alive in digital spaces where truth was harder to bury. And then came the envelope. Not the first one, but another. Delivered with no return address, stamped only with a small triangle mark that matched the one he'd found years ago carved into the underside of his childhood desk. Inside was a single photo. Faded. A classroom. Rows of children sitting perfectly still. A teacher with their face turned away. And Mike, unmistakably younger, standing in the background, staring directly into the camera. The date in the corner was from 3 years before his supposed birth date. On the back, one sentence was scribbled. You were never missing because you were never supposed to be found. He didn't know what it meant, not fully. But it made him realize something he hadn't wanted to accept. The conspiracy wasn't just about stolen children or abandoned experiments. It wasn't just about his brother. It was about identity, memory, the quiet manipulation of time and truth, and how the two could be stretched, bent, or erased entirely in the hands of the right people. Or the wrong ones. Mike had always wondered why he felt disconnected from certain parts of his life, why certain songs made him emotional for no reason, why places he'd never been to felt strangely familiar. Now he understood. There were layers to reality he might never fully peel back, not because he couldn't, but because he might not survive what he'd find. But even with those unanswered questions echoing in the back of his mind, Mike began building something new. Not just for himself, but for his brother and for the others who had been dragged into the dark without a choice. He started a private foundation, quietly funded by sympathetic insiders and watched by nervous institutions, with one goal: help survivors recover their stories. No labs. No experiments. Just humanity. He spoke at forums, shared what he could, and, most importantly, listened to others who carried the same shadows. He knew he'd never get full closure, but he didn't need to anymore. Because now he had something more powerful than truth. He had purpose. Still, sometimes on quiet nights, he'd stare at the photo and wonder if there were more kids like him still out there, if the program ever really stopped, or if it just changed names, changed faces, and kept going underground. After all, the government never confirmed how many children were involved. And the files he had leaked had entire pages blacked out, entire names listed only as initials. And in the deepest corners of the internet, new posts began to appear. Different languages, different continents, but always the same triangle. Always the same message hidden in GPS coordinates, comment threads, and reviews. Missing but not gone. And Mike couldn't shake the feeling that what he uncovered wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.